Greetings and welcome to IT SPARCcast Deep Dive. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's dig deeper.
IT SPARCcast Deep Dive is a venture into topics that we feel are important, with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors.
And we're not going to come in here and waste your time, we hope. We're going to bring up things that we think are really important. And we think that we're in the midst of a major transition here with remote work, and the return to office has turned out to be a challenge that all of us are engaging right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of trends right now. We're seeing Amazon, we're seeing JP Morgan Chase, all these other companies that are enforcing mandatory return to work orders, and they're not giving much time even for people to adjust. And we're seeing this trend and we're getting really concerned about it because in our view, remote work is definitely something that is viable, is sustainable, and actually beneficial for both the employee and the employer. And we think that what's happening is failure on management's part and on IT's part as far as supporting those remote workers.
It goes even beyond that. I personally think that we are in a pivot that the next generation of successful companies will be the ones that figure out how to tap talent from everywhere. And what we want to do with this series is give you hints that we've both of us have worked in remote, either being managed remotely or being remote managers, or in my case, both. My manager last time was sitting right next to me here. And we're going to draw on that experience today to talk about it, because this isn't just a management problem or a technology problem. It's a completely different way of thinking about things that we all got shoved into during COVID. So now that we know that we don't have to sit in traffic, that we don't have to endure this stuff, what works? Well, let's talk about that.
So this is episode 5 of our remote work and RTO debate series. If you haven't seen the first 4 episodes, you can either watch those before or after. This episode kind of stands alone, so you don't really need to watch the previous 4 episodes. So you can finish this one, but I highly suggest going back and watching the first 4. In those first 4, we talked about why remote work is important and how it can be sustainable. We gave you tips and tricks on cameras, sound, lighting, and backgrounds and things like that, that as somebody in IT, you need to be the thought leader and the expert for everybody else in the company. So those are really good episodes to watch. Again, you can watch them before or after. But today what we're going to talk about is, as a manager, supporting those remote workers and supporting on-site workers as needed, and be able to support both. And again, as IT leaders, we need to be at the forefront of this mission. Because if we're not doing this properly, and if we're not waving the flag that remote work is possible, again, sustainable and beneficial, then it's not going to work. We are the tip of the spear. We are the ones that have to be successful in order to show that it can succeed.
Leadership matters. And there's a big difference between managing and leading. And here, folks, especially, there's 2 areas in a company that are going to be most predisposed towards being able to work effectively remotely. One is the information technology folks, you. The other is sales, who are probably going to be some of the most difficult challenges you run into to support. So understanding the management aspect and the leadership aspect of this is going to be enormously useful. So why don't you start in on giving us some insight into how we should structure this, John?
Sure. So first of all, as IT leaders, we have specific challenges when it comes to our supporting. First of all, we're likely to, no matter what, have a mix of remote and on-site workers. And those on-site workers include on-site workers at other facilities. A lot of times we have to have somebody on staff at most of our different facilities, and then we also have remote workers. So that provides the kind of ideal storm for failure if you don't do this properly. The other thing working against us as IT workers is that IT workers tend to sit on the more introverted side of that social spectrum, and they may not have the best conversation skills. So when you put an air gap between management and those individuals, then communication has a tendency to get reduced, and that's always a problem. So one of the things we want to talk about first is keeping that engagement, keeping that communication flow going. And that starts with regular virtual meetings with a purpose. That's section 1. And so the first thing that we want to talk about are weekly team check-ins. So you want to schedule a brief weekly meeting that's focused on the project updates and team goals. So this is not the area where we talk about, one-on-one kind of topics. This is, here's where we go. Ideally you'd do this first thing Monday morning. You would, start the week off with this and go through it. Alternatively, you could do it at the end of the week as a check-in and get prepped for next week, but I like to run these first thing on Monday morning. And to make sure that this is focused with an agenda, you want to make sure that the agenda is published ahead of time. I hate going to a meeting with no agenda. If I get a meeting invite from somebody and it just says sync up in the title, I'm like, why am I here? What's going on? Let me prep, let me understand, is it worth my time showing up? All of those things. So make sure you have an agenda set. And then also just as important is be aware of those that you are scheduling these meetings for, and make sure that if they're in multiple time zones, that you're being appropriate with the scheduling. So I'm on the East Coast of the United States. If I schedule my meetings for 9 a.m. on Monday, that means that my folks on the West Coast are having to attend at 6 a.m. That means that, but if I schedule it, say, for 3 p.m., then that means my folks in Europe are attending at 8, 9, 10 p.m. So be aware of the time zones. So it should be friendly for everyone. You can, depending on your team, if it's not totally globally distributed, you can usually find that sweet spot, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., whatever it might be, that's the least painful for everybody.
If you're spread out more, do you recommend moving that meeting around a little?
Yeah, so there's 2 alternatives that I have when you can't schedule one single meeting at one certain time. One is to rotate the time. So change it so that you're spreading the pain. So in the past, I've had people in Australia and Europe and the United States. And what we would do is every other meeting would either be early in the morning, East Coast time, or 8 o'clock at night on East Coast time. That 8 o'clock at night for my colleague that was in Australia turned out to be, I think, 7 a.m. for him. And he was willing to get up that early and attend that. Now, sometimes that doesn't work. There are going to be cases where it is 2 o'clock in the morning somewhere and it's 10 a.m. somewhere else, and then you just can't make those things work. If your team is large enough and can support it, then you might want to have 2 different team meetings. Maybe you have a night owl meeting and an early morning meeting. So you cover Europe and the eastern half of the United States in the morning meetings, and you cover the West Coast and Asia in the evening meetings. It's a little harder on you as the manager in that you have to have multiple meetings. You have to have one in the morning and one at night, but that seems to work. I have found the sweet spot for somebody like myself who's on the East Coast to be 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. And that 10 a.m. allows everybody in Europe to join with. It's not super late for them. It also allows an early bird on the West Coast to join if they want to join at 7 a.m. Or, if they're in the Midwest, they could join at their 8 or 9 a.m. and that still works. And then that 8 p.m. really covers everybody else. It's 5 p.m. for the West Coast. It's just about any time in the morning to early afternoon you could think of for APAC and India and places like that. So that turns to be the best case. Also, one last thing, keep in mind what day of the week you're scheduling your meetings for. Keep in mind that in certain countries, in the Middle East and other places, Friday is their first day of the weekend. So Friday is a day off. So if you're scheduling something for 8 p.m. on Thursday night, that's actually Friday morning for the Middle East. So just be aware of that so that you're not trying to, just completely innocently, but scheduling time on their time off. The burden should always be on the manager when it comes to the schedule, not on the individual as much as possible.
Also, one thing that I've run into at several projects is when you're scheduling across multiple time zones and multiple countries, check up on the holidays. Right? There's a lot of folks that don't understand American holidays, and we don't understand other folks' holidays. So you need to be extra careful about that.
That's a great point, Lou. And I actually have a link that I just keep in my browser, in the favorites page with international holidays. And so when I schedule things, I definitely look at that. I will put a link to that calendar in the show notes. I think this one might have been Europe specific, but I'll try to find some others. But that's a great point in that you don't want to be scheduling something on a bank holiday in Europe or on a religious holiday somewhere else. And then either have people feel obligated to join or have them miss out and you don't know why. So that's a very important point there. I had a manager who was a great manager. He always felt us make us feel that we were contributing and that we were important. And what he did is he started every team meeting with a wellness check. And what that was allowed every individual in front of their peers to open up as much as they were willing to about anything that was professional or personal issues that were in their way. Now, you don't have to get deep. Some of those conversations would be more appropriate on a one-on-one or a conversation with HR, but at least let people know. So if I'm relying, if Lou and I are peers and I'm relying on Lou to get something done, and Lou says, you know what, I didn't sleep well, my wife and I are both not we're under the weather and I'm not getting enough sleep and I've got this cold, I've got medicine head. Okay, I can know now to expect less from Lou this week than I would have otherwise. And I can, it's justified and I can work around it versus not knowing that and then getting frustrated when Lou doesn't perform well, or Lou killing himself in working so hard that he actually gets more sick because he's trying to keep up with the expectations of the team. So again, this is something that should be voluntary. You shouldn't force people to speak out about things that they don't want to, especially if it's personal. But they can say, look, there's something going on that's keeping me from being at my full right now. Or maybe they're saying like, things are awesome. I'm ready to go. Let me take on additional projects. And then you know that they've got something there. When this happens though, you're going to get resistance. People are not going to want to share that kind of information on the first time. So you need to lead by example. So this leader, Scott, would always start with, this is what's going on in my life. This is what's slowing me down today. And these are the things that are really giving me energy. And this is where I'm working towards. And so this is what you can expect from me. Then it created a bit of a safe space to say things like, maybe I'm just really distracted. I don't know why, but my brain's thinking about something else, or I'm not feeling well, or I just got a big load of work dumped on me that I wasn't planning for, so that's going to impact my output. Whatever it may be, allow them to have that safe space to talk about it. And over time, they will start to believe that they can trust you and that they're not giving up too much information, and then you'll end up with a more efficient working relationship between the peers and the manager.
And I have to comment here that I saw this in real time when John was my manager. The entire team sort of morphed over time to embrace this. And the sharing became a little wider, which was nice because you got a cool hobby like sliding off the road in the middle of the winter or something like that. Well, you might, you have some really great discussion around it. Things that make us more human to each other really increase our effectiveness when we're working together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And earlier, Lou mentioned, multinational, multicultural members of the team. That's great. So we always want that diversity of thought and to bring in new ideas. But sometimes, that provides a gap where we don't really understand what the other person is thinking right now, or what this holiday is, or why they're not attending a meeting. So encourage people to talk about local customs, holidays, traditions. So I had a manager that actually worked for me, and he introduced this as part of his weekly meetings, which I would attend on occasion. And he would get people to talk about things on occasion. So maybe Rosh Hashanah was coming up. So he would have somebody who celebrated that talk about what that meant. Or as the winter holidays came up, he would say, for those of you that celebrate Christmas, talk about your favorite Christmas memories. And it's kind of, it really created a team and a group that really empathized with each other. They cared about each other, and they were engaged with each other much more so than 6 or 7 or 8 remote people that get together once a week to tell their boss what they're doing, and then they never talk to each other again. It was actually really a great example.
And one thing that I noticed in the process that I was doing this is, don't assume other people know your customs just because you're from North America, you're from America, right? They know what Hollywood's exposed them to. They don't know about you, right? They don't know about your, in Hollywood, the entire world is LA and hopefully not on fire. But we have a situation here where different regions have different things, and we have different things we do here versus John, Europe and New England. You do things differently. Share that. It's
100%.
really important.
Yeah. So now that's the basis of having a team meeting. There's a few things that I like to throw in the mix depending on the members of your team. One of the things I like to do is have rotating facilitators. So you pick somebody who actually leads the meeting, and they start the agenda, they read the agenda, they might share first. Now, this this has 2 things. One is it allows for those that want to level up and either become a manager or become the next level of manager, participate in a meeting as a leader and have more exposure from the team and get used to that cadence of running the meeting. But it also takes people who maybe that public speaking or communicating isn't their strong suit, and kind of takes them out of their comfort zone and pushes them to do so. Now, you've got to be careful that you don't push somebody beyond so that they feel imposed upon or that they feel picked on. Coach them if they're having trouble with it. Help them walk through it. Encourage them in the process. That's okay. If they stumble in their thought, that's fine. I stumble all the time. But it helps them grow, pushes them outside. If you get to the point where you find that this is something, I did have a gentleman that had a fear of public speaking. He could not speak in public. And he came to me with that, and I pulled back. I was trying to get him to do customer meetings, and I was trying to get him to do all kinds of other things. And once I realized what I was dealing with, he had an anxiety issue, and that wasn't something that he was capable of doing, totally backed off. So you got to keep tabs on your team. And then the last piece to this is you want to be able to provide an anonymous way for idea submissions. This is a tool where team members can submit ideas or feedback anonymously. So it might be a topic to cover in a future meeting. It might be ways to improve the team. And it might be ways for those people that I mentioned who are more introverted or have issues with being able to speak in public, be able to get their voice out and be able to be heard without having to worry about individual reactions. And I think that while these should be anonymously submitted, they should be discussed amongst the group, even those that might be bad ideas. We can discuss amongst the group so that we as a group can decide, what, we are going to implement that new topic to this meeting on a weekly basis. That might extend the meeting by 10 or 15 minutes. Is that a good trade-off? If everybody agrees or the majority agrees, then yeah, we do that. Or if you as the manager agree, you can just do it as well. But it also allows for a discussion, and people can see, okay, I had this idea, but the group felt that it was going to add too much time or it was going to be cost expense or whatever it was. And as a group, we decided to not go forward, so they at least feel heard and that their idea wasn't just discarded on the cuff. So topic 2 is called tailored engagement. And we want to start with the concept of one-on-one meetings. And this is a topic that I feel very strongly about, that one-on-one meetings are critical, especially for those remote workers. You can make an argument that if you're both in the same office and just swinging by and checking in with people, that might be able to replace a one-on-one meeting, but that's a lot harder to do with your remote workers. So a scheduled one-on-one meeting is incredibly important. And
so question here,
yeah,
if I may, is tailored meetings, as part of managing somebody remotely, you have to take this random and make it explicit? Is that?
Absolutely. So there, in all cases, we should have agendas. We should have a tight focus. As you and I were talking pre-show, you mentioned that these meetings should generally be as short as possible, get it done and move on, get back to our jobs. But they should be tailored to the individual and to the group and to the purpose. So you should not just have meetings for the sake of having meetings. They should have purpose, they should have an agenda, and they should have focus. And if you can get all of that done, then these meetings become something that, okay, I'm going to do this. It's going to be 15 minutes. It's going to be half an hour. It's going to make things better because everybody will know what I need, or I'll know what they need so I can better support them, and we can move forward versus another meeting. So all the meetings that you have, so that's the team meetings that we talked about in the first section. It's your one-on-ones, which we're about to get into. It's report out meetings where you're reporting out to others or you're presenting to others. Again, you should never be going in without the agenda, without focus, and being able to execute that focus at a very crisp level. I think it's really important that everything is tailored, that there's no such thing as a generic meeting. When it comes to the topic of one-on-one meetings, though, on LinkedIn last week, I saw a post that was actually a repost from Instagram, and it was Brian Chesky. And Brian Chesky is the CEO and co-founder of Airbnb. And he went on a bit of a spiel about why one-on-one meetings are bad or are flawed. I'm actually going to read the quote from him directly. The one-on-one model is flawed. It is a recurring 1-hour one-on-one meeting where the employee owns the agenda. True. And what happens is they often don't talk about the things you want to talk about, and you become like their therapist. So here's the problem with that. Yes, a one-on-one meeting should be, the agenda should be controlled by the employee. That's the point of a one-on-one meeting. If it's a status check, that can be done in the group meeting. And then he mentioned, well, you're becoming a therapist. Well, look, if you're the CEO of a large corporation and you are the therapist for your C and VP level employees, well, then that means there's a problem, right? So what a one-on-one should be focused on is what's in my way, what's going on right now. How can you help me as I'm the employee? How can you, the manager,
and coaching as well, right?
Right, I'm struggling with this. Okay, there's an opportunity for coaching. I don't know what you meant by this. I don't know what my deliverables are. My kid is home sick today, so I'm distracted and I got to go every once in a while, go check on them. Whatever it might be, right? Those are the kinds of things that should be handled. So let's talk about one-on-one meetings. So first of all, you need to schedule regular one-on-one check-ins. This is not optional. This is mandatory, especially for your remote workers. They need to know that you are interested in whatever's going on with them. It doesn't need to be an hour. You also need to tailor that for the individual, right? It may be that once a month, 15 minutes is enough because this person is super self-efficient and they can get things done. And if they do have a problem, they'll reach out to you. But not everybody's going to do that. I've had people that I met with once a month. I've had people I met with every 2 weeks, and I had people that I met with every week. And it all had to do with their needs, how senior they were, how capable they were, how confident they were. And generally, all of those start to improve over time. And then you can maybe extend those meetings from every week to every 2 weeks.
So the thing that really stood out to me when you were talking about the Airbnb CEO is an hour. Why does it have to be an hour, right? Why can't we have 5-minute update?
And I would argue that the higher up the food chain you go, the shorter those meetings could be. A CEO might have 10-minute one-on-ones scheduled once a month with each of his C level and VP level reports. If it's an hour-long session where you do feel like a therapist, and that's the case every single meeting, well, then that's a whole different issue. Maybe you need to provide some coaching. Maybe they need some counseling and you can help them get there. Maybe you get HR involved in that. Or maybe, on the unfortunate case, maybe that person's not the right fit for that job. But at least you're learning that through this process.
Another thing that I might suggest, shorten the meeting.
Yeah.
Right? If people think that they have to fill that hour, they're going to do stuff like this. If you're running out of things to say after 15 minutes, have 15-minute meetings.
Yeah, so, and I would say that start with a longer meeting and let it reduce over time, because if you set it for 15 minutes and then you're constantly cutting the person off and saying, I got to go to my next meeting, then that's a problem. They're going to feel that. They're going to feel underappreciated or unheard. But again, tailor the length of the meeting based on the individual, their needs, and past experience. You also want to make sure that that meeting is in their time zone. We talked about time zones when it came to the team meetings, but for those individual one-on-one meetings, the manager should take the brunt. So again, whenever I was managing and having one-on-one meetings with that gentleman in Australia, it was always a nighttime meeting for me. It was 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and it would be the end of my day. I was generally more relaxed, and we would have that meeting, and it was just something that I did as the manager so that that person wasn't feeling obligated to be up and working at 8 or 9 o'clock in their time zone. So I think that's something that I always would appreciate, is that the manager is thinking about me, and I always try to do that as well. I just want to repeat what I had said before, that a one-on-one is so that the manager understands the needs of the individual. This is not a status check. This is not how far into the project are you, and where are the milestones in the project. That's what the team meetings are for. Everybody should be reporting out and the group there. Now, if there's something that's impacting the schedule, then they should be able to bring that to you in the one-on-one, especially if it's something they may be less inclined to share in front of a group. But definitely make sure that they understand that this is their opportunity to tell you about what's going on, and not about, this project is in this status and this project is in this status. That's not the point of this meeting. Now, the other side is, it's really, really important that you give feedback on whatever is being said and on their performance. And I will be the first one to admit that I didn't always give as much feedback as I needed to. And I sometimes struggled with that. But it's something you got to work towards. You got to force yourself to do it, because even the most senior folks, when they lack feedback, will feel angst. So I had a vice president level manager who gave me very little feedback and canceled our one-on-ones on a regular basis. And I have never felt as uncomfortable in my role, and whether I still would have a role coming the next week, the next month, or what have you, as I did at that time. And the person I'm talking about wasn't a bad person. They didn't have it out against me. They were busy and they weren't managing their time effectively, and they just would cancel meetings, or they wouldn't give the feedback that was necessary. Once a year, we would sit down and we would go through a performance review, and I would get some feedback then. But once a year is not enough time to be able to correct and be able to do as good a job as you possibly can.
And I would say, I would chime in here, that one of the big challenges I ran into is when the feedback goes to a trickle, is when they're going to change the organization, right? And there's a lot of uncertainty. So if you are a manager and a leader, and you have folks that are looking to you to see what's going on in the organization, your response is to not talk to people because there's going to be changes. They're gonna know. Right. That's right. As an individual contributor, that's my signal. Start looking for a job.
Or they're going to make it up. So there may not be anything going on. But if you just always seem so busy that you don't have time for your individuals, or you're not communicating, rumors are going to happen. People are going to speculate on what's going on, and that's never a good thing either. So absolutely, you need to be communicating as much as possible. Now, the last, but one of the most important rules when it comes to a one-on-one meeting is that you should never cancel those meetings. It's okay to reschedule them. I mean, conflicts happen, but especially if you're meeting once a month. If you're meeting once a month, definitely reschedule those meetings for a few days later, a few days earlier, whatever it might actually work out. And give a reason for the rescheduling. The CEO has asked me to do this, or I have a family issue I've got to deal with, and then then that's why you're moving it. And make sure that that's included in there. If you get a cancellation, I've had cancellations literally 10 minutes before a one-on-one meeting. And then it's just like, okay, well, now what? I had all this stuff I wanted to talk about, and I need your help, and you canceled the meeting.
Now, does this mean that the folks that you're having the one-on-one meetings with can't cancel?
It's a great point, Lou. And no, if you don't have anything, if everything's smooth and you don't need to have this meeting and you have enough things to get done and all smooth sailing, as an employee, you should feel and be told explicitly that you can cancel these meetings whenever you want. But again, should never ever be canceled by the manager. Now, going back to the group meetings and those types of things where that tailored engagement comes into play, is make sure that you offer flexible involvement. So we talked about people on different, that are more introverted versus extroverted. Be aware of those folks, and that's something that might take time to figure out. But if you're putting somebody who's got anxiety about speaking in front of a public forum and you're forcing them to report out for 10 minutes on something, you're putting a lot of stress on that individual. So make sure that you understand who you're dealing with. And maybe you got people who feel that they need to speak up more. You need to be able to manage that so that they're not completely taking over the meeting, but give them the opportunity to do that. And when you have these activities, as I mentioned earlier, the rotating facilitator, if somebody's not comfortable with that, give them the opportunity to pull out of it. Maybe encourage them to work on whatever it is that's holding them back from that, if it seems appropriate, and then help them grow into being able to do that. So in both the one-on-one and the group meetings, you want to foster open and honest communication. You want to make sure that it's known that it's okay to make mistakes, no matter how big. Come talk to me. Work it out with either with us individually, one-on-one, or in the group. I promise to you that if you come to me and said, I screwed up, this is what I did, I'm going to help you fix it. I'm not going to turn that into an opportunity to come down on you hard. But on the other side, don't let me be surprised by hearing about that mistake some other way. So, and then you as a manager need to make good on that. The first time somebody comes to you and says, okay, I was working on the database and I wiped out this data and the backup's going to take this long and it's going to be a disruption or whatever the problem is. Okay, what do you need? How do I help you get past it? Don't why did you wait till a service window? What are you doing? That's not the right time to do that. They've come to you, they've opened up about their mistake, and they're letting you know what they're doing to fix it, and they may or may not be asking for help. Deal with that. Now, there might be a coaching opportunity there but that coaching opportunity should come later after the issue or crisis or whatever it is resolved.
And I've got to tell you, from a personal standpoint, having been on both ends of this, when somebody comes to you and says, I screwed up, here's how do I fix this? They've already gotten past the hard part, which is admitting, A, there was a problem, B, I was the problem, and C, how do I fix it? They've internalized that mistake in a way that you lecturing them will never do.
This is one of the most important rules that I have, and I make it as part of the first time I meet with either individuals or a group. That's one of the top topics that we talk about. I make mistakes. I make lots of mistakes. You're going to make a mistake. That's okay, because you're human. Come talk to me about it and we will deal with it. If, on the other hand, you don't come talk to me about it and I find out it especially from my boss, you and I are going to have a problem. That's not a relationship ending problem the first time, but it's going to be something I keep in mind that you didn't come open up about that issue. So then we'll talk about that. That will be a coaching opportunity. But again, it's critical that you make good on that on both sides. Don't let them get away with that behavior, but don't come down on them when they admit their mistakes. Super important.
And also, if you make a mistake as a leader, as a manager, be transparent about that.
100%. And again, that's the thing that's going to help open it up. When you say, you know what, I was working on this and we were all going to get this benefit because of it and because I screwed up, and then this is what I'm doing to fix it. That's the kind of thing that will humanize you as a manager and allow them to feel that it's a safe space to be able to do the same.
What if I want to be a micromanager?
That means you're a weak manager. So weak managers micromanage. And I think we've all been there where we've had the micromanager asking us for regular updates at a super microscopic level. I've had micromanagers who were trying to get me to micromanage my people, and I would always resist that. and they would ask about the most infinitesimal little details of some of the projects that were going on. I don't know. The team's working on it. It's working fine. They're getting the work done. I don't need to know the exact version of the database that's being used. That's not something as a VP I need to know. So I'm not going to report up what that is. So, and I feel that the majority of times that remote work fails, it's because of micromanagement. Because micromanagement can't work on remote work.
Is it always the fault of the manager if you have to micromanage though?
No, absolutely not. If you are forced into micromanaging, then that means that you've got an issue. Again, hopefully it's something that they can be coached out of, but or maybe they're just junior enough that they need additional help. But that should come across as coaching versus micromanaging. And there is a big difference there. Whereas coaching is finding out where the problems are and providing the tools, the resources, the training in order to help them get to where they need to be, versus I need hourly updates on what's going on with this, or I need to meet with you every day, or I need a 2-page report at the end of every week so I can ignore it. But if I wanted to, I could read it and go through and see what you did all week. None of those things are good, right? I've always felt angst when I had to write up a big report on what I did for the week. And I know people that I've worked with that wanted to do that. And that's fine if they want to do that. Maybe they communicate better via writing than they do verbally. Again, we'll talk about some of that in part 2 of this session, but allowing them to communicate the way that they're most comfortable with. But micromanagement is a problem. So set those goals and have check-ins, and then give trust and responsibility. If that trust and responsibility turns out to be misplaced, then again, we need to take some sort of action. Hopefully that's coaching, education, and tools. And if that's not enough, if it's the individual is just not ready for the job, then it's move or move out as necessary with that individual.
And if you find yourself being a micromanager, that by setting goals and check-ins, you can move yourself out of it. Is that what you're saying?
It depends on why you're a micromanager. So a lot of micromanagers are micromanagers because of their own lack of confidence. And maybe they're dealing with imposter syndrome and they feel that they shouldn't be in this role. So they need to know everything that's going on so that if anybody asks them any specific question, they can have an answer. They're uncomfortable with, I don't know, but I can find out. It's a really simple but powerful statement. Think about all the things that you don't know. So Lou understands the way a nuclear reactor works to a degree that I never will. I can go find information on it. I can go ask Lou. I may not know as the manager the nth detail of the project. I know it's on time, or I know that it's not on time and why. I know that it's on budget or that it's not, and I know why. But I may not know those nth details. And I need to be confident with when somebody says, well, what version of the database are they using for this? I don't know, but I'll find out. And then I'll go find out and I'll come back and let them know. Might also ask why they care, but that's a whole other piece there.
So you could think about it this way. I got a guy or a gal.
Yeah.
That individual is tops. I trust them. It gives you, believe it or not, that will make your leaders feel better about what you're doing as well. Absolutely. Personal experience.
So that's going to cover part 1 on this section on managing remotely. In part 2, we're going to talk about asynchronous communication tools. We're going to talk about team building activities, and we're going to talk about recognizing your contributors and the contributions of those on your team. So that's going to be a really important one. And again, just as important as the other topics that we talked about. But as we wrap this up, we couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We would really love to know what you think. How do you feel about group meetings? Do you agree or disagree with my take on one-on-one meetings and how critical they are? Do you have any other topics you want us to cover? Send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com, or hit us up on X at itsparkcast. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications. That's really going to help this channel grow. It's also going to let you know whenever we release new content, new shorts, whatever it might be, you'll get those right away. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.